Okay, so we are going to be getting started in about 2 minutes. So folks who are standing at the back, if you want to come and grab a seat. It got really quiet. Okay, so welcome everyone to the 3rd annual Take Back the Night March at Humber College and University of Guelph, Humber. My name is Yami. I am the coordinator for the BASE program here at Humber College, and I am so excited for tonight. How many of you is this your first Take Back the Night? Make some noise! So Take Back the Night is a rowdy event, so I want you all to bring it. You all have lovely thunder sticks right on your chairs or below your chairs if someone moved it, as well as march chants and a program schedule. And so for those of you who are not familiar with what Take Back the Night is, it is a grassroots event that started in the 1970s where folks who had experienced gender-based violence had said no more. And they wanted to reclaim the streets, and so they did. They went out there just like we're gonna do tonight, and they marched. And they marched with messages of hope, reclamation, survivor-centric messaging to give people hope, and that is what we're gonna continue to do here today. So I would like to thank community partners for coming out tonight and showing their support. So we have lovely tables in the back of many organizations such as LGBTQ Youth Line, Ernestine Shelter, and many more. So if you didn't already have the chance to check them out, make sure that you do so before we head out. So I would like now to introduce Regina Hartwick, who is the manager of Aboriginal Resource Center here at Humber College, to do the land acknowledgement.
I just want to kind of see how they're going to do this. Can you tell me how they do it in the language? Anine, how does it go through? Does it say anything, Gij? Okay, I'm just going to do, so I'm going to introduce myself in the language. So, Anin, Kwekwe, Ginin, Dijnakas, Wabjeshi, Minwa, Mashikan, Dodem, Kichizibi, Donjaba, Anishinaabe, Kwe, and Dao. So what I just said was my name is Gina. I am of the Martin on my father's side and the Turtle Clan on my mom's side. What did they do to the language? Okay. I am an Anishinaabe Kwe, which means I'm an Anishinaabe woman. And I'm from the Kichizibi, which is the Ottawa River Valley, and I'm a member of Ardok Algonquin First Nation. And so I'm happy to be here because we're in a time where events like this are possible. We're taking a look at ourselves, and we're looking at our communities, and we're looking at our relationships and how we're going to move forward as individuals and as peoples. And Indigenous peoples continue to sit at the forefront of violences that have been committed going back to the first time of contact, but also going forward. So violence against land is also violence against Indigenous peoples. And so as we go forward, I thought it was important to talk about the place that we're sitting on right now. So this place is known as Adobagok. It is the place of the black alders in the Anishinaabe language. And it's situated in the Humber River watershed, which has provided an integral connection for Indigenous peoples going into the Lake Simcoe, Georgian Bay region. And so as people, we're all connected to land, and so that's something that we all have in common, and it's something that we can connect with as we move forward. And so as we move forward tonight, remember that land is the center of our relationships, and that those violences, they need to stop. And when we're talking about Indigenous peoples, we are talking about these histories. And so connect with this place, and if you want to learn more, reach out to us. Miigwech.
Thank you so much. So to open our program, I would like to welcome Charles Pentagoost. Perfect. For an indigenous drumming ceremony.
So not only am I gonna sing, but I was also given tobacco to explain a little bit about what's gonna happen tonight and a little bit about tobacco protocol. So what is said about tobacco is that it's our medium of communication and how we want to connect to the earth, to creation, to the universe as indigenous people. So we're giving you this opportunity tonight to work with tobacco in that way. In working with wanting to connect to those beings out there, to the trees, to the land, and to the universe. So with your tobacco, you're gonna hold it in your left hand. Me, I'm a little bit of a environmentalist, so I'd say keep the cloth and the ribbon, or the little thing that's tied together, and then empty that tobacco out onto the land. But because of the nature of this walk, it's almost as if anything you have done or has been done to you, you're gonna let that go with that. So you're gonna put your thoughts into that tobacco, and it's almost like a letting go. So what I'm telling you and instructing you to do is when you open your tobacco and you put it in your hand, it's almost gonna be sad and very emotional. Because what you're doing is you're letting go. You're letting go of any harms that have come to you, and you're saying to creation, I want to let that go. I want to walk in a good way. I want to be a good, kind person, and I want to relate to people in a good, kind way. And I want to relate to this land in a good, kind way. This land that we are situated on, Adobigok, it's actually, and in English it's Etobicoke. So it's very close to the original pronunciation. So that's how you can acknowledge this place, Adobigok, or as close to you can, just say Etobicoke. But the song I want to offer up is a flag song, and what that is equivalent to is a national anthem for the indigenous people. So every time that we have a gathering and there's eagle staffs present or other dignitaries present, we will offer up those flag songs in honor of the nations coming in and sharing space with one another. So a little bit of protocol, and I forgot to introduce myself in the language. Majijawan indigenous cause, almost close in Dodem, Nijoa Egua indigenous medel, Ojibwe Bodoada ni Odawa Nishnabe endao, Migocho endam, Gegin Gegigwigano na nin waja gamon man pi miigwech. So as such, I ask that you stand when you hear this song, because it is seen as a national anthem. And hats off. Yeah. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Charles and Regina. What you remind us as settlers is that colonization, sexual violence, gender-based violence was a part of colonization. And as we gather here today and as we march, we cannot divorce the two. And so thank you. We know that 1 in 3 women experience some form of gender-based violence in their lives. 1 in 7 men. Trans and non-binary survivors are 5 times more likely to experience gender-based violence. And so what that says is in this room right now, we are amongst survivors within our communities. And so if at any point tonight you feel like you may want to check in with someone, we do have active listeners available. Caitlin and Navisha, who are located near the exits, and if you can wave so I can locate you, there you are. Caitlin and Navisha. So they are student intervention coordinators and are available to speak to anyone at any point during the event. And you are encouraged to connect with Humber counseling services as well afterwards if that is something that you feel like you need. Some other housekeeping issues is that we have an all-gender washroom, which is located at the welcome desk. Event photography is in place, which I imagine you've seen many of them already around. And if you prefer not to have your photo taken, please connect with one of the folks in the teal shirts or Jennifer, who's waving, and she will make sure that you get a lanyard that indicates that you do not want a picture taken. So next, I have the privilege of introducing Meg Houghton, who's also my boss, the Associate Dean of Wellness and Equity, for our opening remarks. Meg. Oh.
Thank you, Yami. Well, I hope you feel the energy in the room tonight, because I certainly do. My chest is swollen as I look around the room in an overwhelming energy, and I think that that energy is humanity. It's our common humanity that brings us here tonight, that puts us all in a position where we want a better world, where we are fighting for a better world that is safe for everybody, and that is acknowledged as a right. We have sacred lives, and traditional teachings talk about how we are all here to fulfill a unique life purpose. And there are corrosive forces that stand in the way of us being able to fulfill that with the ease that we should be able to. And that number one corrosive force is violence. And that's what we're here to stand up against tonight. Well, it fills my heart to see so many of you here to share in that voice and to fight for that better world and to declare unapologetically, this is not all right. It also saddens me profoundly that we need to do this every year. That between this event and next year's event, there will be new victims, new survivors, that violence will carry forward. And so it is very important that we acknowledge the energy in the room tonight and that we continue to pull together in saying no. We are creating a better world where everyone is safe, and we are going to do that together. So my challenge to you, leaving here tonight, is to think about where violence exists in your life. Because the reason there will be new victims, new survivors between tonight and next year is that we're casual about violence. And there's nothing casual about a culture that encourages discrimination, oppression, hatred, physical violence, emotional violence against any part of our human family. And so I hope that you will hear that misogynistic song lyric. Hear that comment that passes for a joke. See the subtle ways that we divide each other by not honoring each other's full humanity, and find your voice against it. We are in a moment where it is so critical that we take this zeitgeist that is happening out there, where women primarily across racialized, trans, indigenous, disabled, impoverished communities are saying no more. We all need to get behind that. We all need to find our voice, because there is nothing casual about violence. And so we are here to say no tonight, but I hope you will say no in every minute you can where you're seeing the reduction of humanity occur casually around you in a violent fashion. Okay? It is that culture that enables violence, that enables sexual assault. And we all have a role in creating safer communities. Perpetrators do not discriminate, but they do target. And so as Yamakani said, I'd like to acknowledge that women, girls, trans women and girls, indigenous women, racialized women, and women with disabilities are disproportionately victims of sexual violence. And men and boys are not free from this either. So at Humber College, we're doing a lot of work on this, and I'm really just heartful to see all of you here, to see this huge group of volunteers who've made tonight happen. Tonight is one part of a much bigger effort on our part to reverse a culture of violence. We do bystander training. We've got all sorts of consent efforts that our student leaders lead. We have tremendous policy and procedure here. And we are actively engaging men in conversations about violence. There is no other athletics community in Canada that has celebrated inclusion and safety like our athletes have. So I'd like to acknowledge that too. All of these things are intentional. We have to be intentional in policy, in word, in action to turn it around. And there's no better place than higher education to start that, because you're all the future. You know, a better world is not outside of our reach. It is essential that we craft this together. So I'm here tonight with you as an administrator and as a survivor in solidarity to take back the night, to take back the day, to take back the classroom, to take back the boardroom, to take back the locker room, to take back any space that has encouraged or enabled violence. You're here tonight to say no more, and I thank you for that, and I hope you say it every day until we've eliminated violence in our communities altogether. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meg. As you said, we're here to take back space, right? And I think that is so incredibly important for survivors, for those who support survivors, and for our larger community. And so next, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, who I'm so excited to hear. Sidra Ahmed Maysoon is a fierce advocate for ending gender-based violence and contributes to these movements through writing and community organizing, as well as speaking. She is the coordinator of the Ontario-wide anti-violence against women public education campaign at the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, also known as OCASI. She is also the founder of the River of Hope's Projects on Islamophobic Violence, which is a research-based initiative that looks to support Muslim survivors from Islamophobic assault. Her work and activism has been profiled on CBC, Global News, Toronto Star, U of T News, Omni Television, Village Voice, which is in New York City, Muslim Girl, and many, many more. You may have also will probably recognize her from an op-ed that she wrote about the sex ed curriculum for the Toronto Star, which went viral. Sidra holds a Master's of Arts in Adult Education and in Community Development from the University of Toronto. What you won't know about Sidra is that she has such a kind heart, and knowing her all these years and seeing all the amazing work that she has done, it is a treat to have you here. Thank you, Sidra, and everyone, please, a warm welcome for Sidra.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me as part of this event, and I'm looking forward to marching with all of you. And hopefully, what I share here will get us going. So I'm going to start my talk by sharing a scene with you. If you could just join me here. I'm sitting at the computer in the evening. You know that time past dinner when you're not ready to go to sleep, you don't really want to do anything more, so you're scrolling through social media. So I'm sitting at my computer, scrolling through my feed, and then all of a sudden, a story breaks that starts trending about a prominent man in the United States who's been accused of rape. Now, my first thought is, you know what, shut down the computer, you gotta go to bed, this isn't gonna go well. But I keep scrolling, I keep looking, and then I end up looking at some of the comments that people are making on this story. And I see things like people saying, well, why did it take her so long to report if this happened? People calling her a liar. People saying that she's crazy. People saying that, well, there are gaps in her story. She didn't remember the whole thing, so maybe it didn't really happen. That must mean it's not true. Liar, 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 liar. That's all I see. It goes on, and all of a sudden, the computer screen that I've been looking at, it feels too bright. It starts hurting my eyes. My chest gets tight. My breathing is starting to get shallow. And actually, I'm like, maybe I'm actually holding my breath. My mind starts to race, and all I'm seeing is these comments, and they kind of all fade into a blur. And then the realization that I've had so many times before hits me, and it is that if I ever came forward, they would say the same thing about me. They would ask why I didn't report earlier. They would ask why I didn't remember the story in its full sequence. They would call me a liar. My heart sinks deep into my stomach, and at this point, I do turn off the computer. And I do some of the things that people have suggested to me when, stories like this hit. I had a glass of water, I tried to read a book, and, eventually I do fall asleep. So I am able to sleep that night, but I have bad dreams. The next morning I wake up, I get ready, I go to work. Coworker asks me, well, how was your evening last night? You had a long day yesterday. How was your evening? And all I say to her is, oh, it was fine, right? Put that smile on my face. So I'm here to share with you that it's been 7 years since I faced a sexual assault that turned my life completely upside down. But I am not here to share details about that assault with you. Too often, survivors are asked to relive their traumas in front of people as a kind of spectacle. Sometimes it feels like it's bordering on entertainment. This idea that we have to display all of the pain, all the graphic details, and then, and only then, can we get a bit of sympathy? I mean, I'm not sure if anyone saw the news today. That's what happened today in hearings that were happening in the United States. A survivor was forced to tell details of a traumatic story in front of a Senate hearing, right? So I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to share the details of my assault for people to consume, but I am going to share the impact it had on my life. Because I desperately want people to understand that when these things happen, there's an impact that can last for a long time. I'm here to share with you what life is like in the days, months, and even years after an assault. So immediately after the assault that happened 7 years ago, I had severe post-traumatic stress. And this is something people usually think about soldiers from war having, PTSD, post-traumatic stress. That's what the association people usually have, but it happens to survivors of sexual assault as well. So what did my post-traumatic stress look like? I wasn't able to work. I would cry uncontrollably. I would space out. One thing that really bothered me is since I would space out because of the post-traumatic stress is I lost my laptop on the subway, and laptops are expensive, So that happened. And I was really on edge around men. I couldn't be around men. Even friends that I'd had for a long time, I was just like, I couldn't be around them. It was too much. I also withdrew from my social and professional network. So I had just graduated from a program and was planning to go into a certain field, and I withdrew from that because the man who had committed the assault was a big name in that area. He was all over my social and professional network. So I withdrew. And I didn't make that decision lightly. I made a calculated decision that so many survivors have to face. Number one, he had more financial resources than me. Before the assault, he told me how much money he made. And he actually told me about previous court battles he'd won related to work. I didn't have the resources to take on someone like that. In a justice system that is extremely biased against survivors of sexual violence, I wasn't ready to be torn apart on the witness stand with my post-traumatic stress. No, that wasn't an option for me. So I looked at my resources, I looked at his resources, I looked at the justice system and all its failings, and I made a decision and I withdrew. I realized at that moment that there was nothing I could do. And I think that was the moment I understood we live in a rape culture. We live in a culture where a man could assault me, and there was nothing I could really do to hold him accountable. Nothing. I couldn't even name him on Facebook or Twitter because I would risk being sued for defamation. I was effectively muzzled and disempowered by the flaws in our system, and no one cared. The world moved on. No matter how much I had worked and contributed to society up to that point, I felt and I saw it moving on without me. And so I saw that survivors of sexual violence are often treated as disposable by our society. So during this time, fortunately, I was able to receive free counseling from a clinic, and that saved my life. At counseling, I learned more about trauma. So remember, I was talking about post-traumatic stress and PTSD. People usually think that's something that only happens to soldiers. No, it happens to people who have survived rape and sexual assault. And I learned that in moments of trauma, our minds go into something called fight or flight mode. And when our minds are in fight or flight mode, basically you think you might die, so your brain is going 1,000,000 miles an hour trying to figure out what to do to survive. And when our brain's doing that, we're not going to remember every last detail of the event in perfect order. I'm not going to remember whether he was wearing a gray shirt or a blue shirt. I'm too busy trying to figure out how to stay alive. And this is something that I wish more people knew. Because going back to those comments I was talking about on news stories, so often people say, well, if it really happened, how come she doesn't remember if it was 6 p.m. or 6:05 p.m.? If she doesn't remember that detail, she must be making it up. No. Trauma makes it difficult to remember those kinds of details. The effect of trauma shouldn't be used to discredit a survivor. You know, that's like telling someone with a broken arm, well, how come you can't lift something? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So the trauma counseling helped. But again, the impact on my life was pretty profound. I had stepped back from my professional and social network that I'd worked hard to build. And I want to put something out to the audience. You know, I'm sure most of you have heard, you know, often when a man is held accountable for sexual violence, people ask and people moan and the violins come out and they say, oh, well, what about the impact on his life? What about the impact on his career? Everything he's worked for and built. Surely this, you know, if we hold him accountable for the sexual violence, his life is, you know, what will happen to his reputation and his life? But rarely, if ever, do you hear people having those same concerns about the survivor, about the impact on her life, on her career, on her well-being. Recently, we've seen a prominent Canadian perpetrator of sexual violence, Jian Ghomeshi, being given a platform to write 7,000 words about his thoughts that were not honest in the New York Literary Review magazine. So he was able to write this really major piece for a big publication to share his story, and people were saying that this is his attempt at a comeback. And people were saying that, you know, that this was just something that he deserved. And again, who is thinking about the 24 victims of violence of his that have come forward and who have not been given justice and who have not been given platforms to write their story and relaunch their damaged careers and lives? So this is the double standard that we see every day and that survivors have to live with every day. As has been mentioned already today, we know that 1 in 3 women will face domestic or sexual violence in her lifetime. And as has already been discussed, we know that women facing other forms of oppression are even more likely to be targeted for sexual violence. I think of Indigenous women and girls in Canada who face high rates of sexual violence and gender-based violence due to the legacy of colonialism. Just this past February, a jury found 55-year-old Raymond Cormier not guilty of murdering 15-year-old Tina Fontaine, in spite of enormous evidence that he was involved. And this horrified, you know, many people, but especially activists for the rights of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. I also think of Black women and girls and how Black girls are sexualized at a young age and treated as adult women, undeserving of safety and protection. The impact of anti-Black racism and sexism combined, which the term that I've been privileged to learn to apply to that is misogynoir. I think about that. I think about women with physical or mental disabilities who face 3 times the rate of sexual violence as other women. I think about trans women and women of color who face high rates of violence and who often do not feel welcome in services that are supposed to be there to support people who have been through violence. And I think about women without permanent status in Canada, who may fear accessing services or leaving their abuser because of the fear of deportation hanging over their head. And yet the story of these women aren't usually prominent or featured when we talk about sexual violence. These aren't the faces or the names that we hear about first. Even though the Me Too movement was started over a decade ago by a Black woman named Tirana Burke, it was only when rich white celebrities started using the hashtag that it gained mainstream media attention. How many people here have heard of Tirana Burke? Okay, well, now you've heard her name. Look her up. Follow her on Twitter. She's the founder of the Me Too movement. But again, it was when rich white celebrities started using the hashtag that it got mainstream media attention. So what does this tell us about whose stories matter? And what does this tell us about who is seen as disposable? Intersectionality is a term that was created by a Black feminist scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw. Who's heard of intersectionality before? Okay, most people. Okay, so she created this term to recognize the fact that not all women are oppressed in the same way or to the same extent. She outlined how Black women face sexism in a different way than white women do, because the sexism that Black women face is overlayered with an experience of racism, and you can't separate the two. That term misogynoir I was telling you about earlier, you cannot separate the two. Crenshaw's framework of intersectionality has been extended and used to talk about other kinds of intersecting oppressions. I personally occupy the space as a visibly Muslim woman of color. So for me, my experience of sexism is overlayered by my experience of Islamophobia. The two are connected for me in a very deep and meaningful way. When people look at me, they often assume that I'm oppressed or that I'm weak and other such stereotypes. So I experience sexism differently than white, non-Muslim women. So I tell you this to explain why I am one of those people who is inspired by the Me Too movement, but I don't currently see people like me or our stories represented in it. And it's difficult to step forward as a survivor of sexual violence in any case, but there's an added layer of difficulty to step forward as a survivor of sexual violence as a visibly Muslim woman. That's what I've experienced, at least. It feels like walking a minefield to speak up sometimes. If I share that I'm a survivor, sometimes people's first thought is, well, you know, I'm sure I know who did this to her. It must have been a barbaric Muslim man. You know what those people are like, right? Send them all back to where he came from. I mean, you've heard these kinds of things. In my case, by chance, it just so happened that the perpetrator was a white non-Muslim man. And I believe that he targeted me because of Islamophobic stereotypes. I believe he targeted me because he thought that as a Muslim woman, I was weak and that I was an easy target. So that is why, for me, addressing Islamophobia and addressing sexism and addressing sexual violence are all linked, because in my experience of life, they've all been linked. I want to tell you a bit more about the long-term impact of sexual assault. So I described the post-traumatic stress that happened in the first 6 or so months for me. But after that trauma counseling I was telling you about, things started to get better. I was sleeping better, I got a job that I liked, the flashbacks were less. And I think, and this is really important because this really bothers me, I think that's the point that most people want survivors to draw a neat line and be like, okay, you're better now. We're done, right? You got your trauma counseling, you're not having flashbacks, so all right, off you go, we're done, the support is over. And the reality is, and this is true for a lot of survivors I know, is that the journey of healing is a long one, much longer than that. Even though I was more functional at that point, I still would have anxiety and difficulties, and some days it would feel like I was back to square one and it had just happened yesterday. I've heard the term or the saying, healing is not linear. You can take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back sometimes. That was my experience. And so I really want people to know what this is like. Whenever I share this, I find the survivors in the room are nodding. They're like, yep, that's true. You know, especially if I say something like, at the year-long anniversary, when it was a year past the assault, that day was really hard. You know, it felt like I was reliving it that day. Same with 2 years, same with 3 years. Every year that anniversary is hard. But I want everyone, not just survivors, to understand that there's a long-term impact to sexual violence and that survivors deserve long-term support. So where am I at today? I think too often, kind of like wanting to draw that neat line and saying, okay, you're better now, people want to hear a story of triumph, you know, being like, okay, how did you come out the other side and how is everything amazing now? And that's not true for me. I don't have a story of triumph or a neat picture to give you where I can tie it all up in a bow and say, here's how I got through the whole thing. The truth is, I still struggle today. That story that I began with, where I shared about scrolling through the news feed and kind of having a panic attack and then having horrible dreams, that happened a week ago, truth be told. And it's been 7 years since the assault. I share this with you so that you can understand that the impact of trauma is long-lasting. So although I can't give you a story of triumph, I can give you a lot of hope. As was shared in the introduction, I now coordinate a campaign, a province-wide campaign to educate people about violence against women and to try to make change. I've also done research and created a toolkit on Islamophobic violence against Muslim women. Because again, this is an issue that's very close to my heart because I believe that's what motivated the sexual assault against me. And I've also had people read my writing. And that's been an amazing experience for me. I remember after the violence happened, I would be at home and I'd be writing poems on my own and writing things on my own. And the idea of having people actually read what I have to write and want to hear what I have to say has been beautiful for me. You know, that article that I wrote about the sex ed curriculum was read 100,000 times, which is amazing. I'm so grateful for that. And so even though there aren't formal ways through the system that I've been able to get justice, victories like that are my own way to get a form of justice for myself. So I'm going to end with a few things. One is to just give you some tips on how to support someone who tells you they've been through sexual violence. And then I have a message for everyone here before we march. So if someone you know tells you that she has been through sexual violence, what you say to her in response is really, really important. First, it's important to tell her that you believe her. So just saying, I believe you, is huge. Also, tell her that it's not your fault because society at large tends to blame people who have been through sexual assault. She's going to get a lot of blaming messages from many other sources, so you can be that person who can constantly tell her it is not your fault. There's nothing you can do that will make it okay for someone to sexually assault you. Nothing. And the third thing I would say, after telling her, I believe you, it's not your fault, thank you for trusting me, thank you for telling me, is to connect her with resources. And a good place to start is the Assaulted Women's Helpline. You can give her that number and it will connect her with resources in the area. But one thing about connecting her with resources, give them to her, but don't pressure her to use them. Make sure she is the one who's getting to choose what happens next. So you give her the resources and it's up to her whether she wants to use them or not. Because control has already been taken away from her, and you don't want to get in there and start trying to control her and pushing her around and telling her what to do. Even if it's from a place of concern, it's important to avoid doing that. Just say, here are some resources. If you ever want to use them, I'm here to support you. I'm here for you. So before we march, I have 3 quick messages to end with. 1 for survivors, 1 for men, and 1 for my perpetrator. First, to any survivors in the room, I want to say thank you. No one, not a therapist, not any professional, no one has helped me more in my healing journey than other survivors. So I want to thank you for everything you share, everything you do on a daily basis, and I want you to know that you're not alone, and that even if everything feels terrible right now, my story hopefully can help you see that eventually, with time, it can get better. Next, I have a message to the men in the room. How many of you have heard about being allies, being a male ally? Okay, I'm gonna say something a little different. I don't want you to be an ally. I want you to be a traitor. I want you to be a traitor to a system that holds you up at the expense of women. I want you to betray that deal that's made with you, that, you know what, if you just kind of be quiet and go with the flow, everything's going to be good for you. Don't pay attention to what's happening over there. Don't pay attention to that woman over there. Don't pay attention to these people who are complaining. Just go with the flow, keep your head down, and everything's going to be okay for you. I need you to betray that system. I need you to make waves. I need you to talk to other men in your life. I need you to learn from women and from survivors about what we need you to do in this moment, because we're fighting a battle on a daily basis, and I don't think anyone has the right to stand by. And lastly, I have a message to my perpetrator. You may have had the system stacked on your side and all cards in your favor, but nothing will save you from your mediocrity. Buckle up, because I'm just getting started. My voice is getting louder and louder every single day, and I haven't forgotten a thing. So I am really looking forward to taking back the night with all of you, and has been mentioned, not just taking back the night, but taking back the day, taking back our lives from violence, taking back our voices, and taking back whatever hurt has been done to our hearts. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I do not take this for granted, being able to be heard. So I truly appreciate the opportunity, and I hope you gain something from this. Thank you so much. See you out there.
Sidra, that was amazing. As you were speaking, a quote from Audre Lorde came to me. And it goes that when we are afraid, our words would not be heard or welcome. We say nothing. And when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak. And today you spoke, and you shared your truth. And thank you. Everyone, another round of applause. And so next, I would like you to extend a warm Humber welcome to Ariel Buerkle. Ariel is a Humber alumni from the Registered Practical Nursing Program here at Humber, and is in her second year of a Bachelor's of Applied Science and Psychology at the University of Guelph Humber. You may have seen her on the video if you came earlier. She is a senior peer consent educator here at the North Campus. And so everyone, please join hands and welcome Ariel to share her story.
Okay, hello, can we all hear me? Yes? Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's turnout is a true testament of Humber College and Guelph Humber University's ability to come together as one to support and stand for a worthy and noble cause. For that, I thank you. I was asked on stage today to share my sexual assault experience from a student survivor perspective. I asked myself, am I at the right headspace to share this experience? The answer was and is clear. After 8 long years of holding in my secret, I am ready, willing, and able to share. Through my essay titled, "The Meaning Behind Earning Your Black Belt." "Please, I don't want to," cried out a woman's voice. I say a woman's voice because it did not sound like my own. How could it? Something like this could never happen to me. And yet, the words escaped me, sounding so fragile, so weak. I wanted, no, needed to sound assertive, dominant, and strong. I needed to get him off from on top of me. Warm, salted tears streamed from my eyes and onto the cool cement floor. I had wiggled one arm free from the pressure and weight of his body. I reached into the darkness of the unfinished basement, begging for a response, for a familiar hand to raise me up and pull me away from this nightmare. No help came. Understanding my predicament, I knew that if I did not manage to break free, then he would be the victor. With one jutting motion, I managed to escape his embrace for a second. I ran, but only managed to flee to the opposite corner of that pitch-black dungeon. I cowered in the corner, frantically clawing and scraping at the walls with my fingertips to escape this hell. Rough hands emerged from the shadows to pull me back down onto the floor, next to that yellowing twin mattress, so he could finish what he had started. This was the end, my end. Thoughts feverishly ran through my mind. How did I get here? Why me? Why can no one hear me scream? Why is no one looking for me? The month was November, ironically my birthday month. A month which held meaning of celebration, joy, and happiness. Now it is a reminder of that day of isolation, depression, and despair. Happy birthday, indeed. What had started out as an innocent evening out with my friends ended with an innocent victim. I entered that house party with 3 other girls that night. 4 girls entered, but only 3 left. Inside the house was your typical partying scene. Beer pong in one corner, drunk girls making out with each other in the front of an audience for attention, and a big old keg in the middle. Majority of the guys at the party were from school. They were paying so much attention to me, telling me I was beautiful, how excited they were to see me, and how they would love to get to know me better. The lingering odor of stale beer, cheap tobacco, and marijuana swirled off of their tongues as they spoke. It was intoxicating, and I was intoxicated. I made sure to ask one of the girls to come grab me when they were deciding to leave. At a point, the house was emptying, but no one came to get me. I was alone, vulnerable. I asked one of the guys I was most familiar with to help me get home. He took my hand and led me down into the shadowy depths of unfamiliarity and onto a yellowing twin mattress. It was here where something was gained and lost. He gained another notch on his proverbial black belt, his trophy for taking a black woman's innocence I lost. Lost my right, lost my voice, and lost my identity as Ariel Buerkle. Today, I stand in solidarity with you all as a resilient and strong woman who is ready to take back our voices, our rights, and our night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariel, for sharing your story with us. That took a lot of courage. So, as we come to the part of the night where we will be heading out shortly and taking back the night, before we do this, I want to encourage self-identified survivors and folks with mobility devices to take the lead at the front of the march. Allies and advocates marching behind them in support. As Regina mentioned, tobacco ties will be distributed to all marchers before we head out. We will end here at the end of the march in front of the LRC for a group photo. Hot chocolate and light snacks will be provided inside. For folks who took the Lakeshore bus, please meet us outside the LRC building after the march. The bus will be departing at 8:15 sharp, which it may leave a little later because we started a little later, so. And before we exit for the march, nope, read that part, so let's keep going. We would like to thank everyone who came out tonight to show their support and stand in solidarity with survivors. I'm gonna remix this. Jen, wave. Yes. So everyone, if we can just give a round of applause to Jen. So for those who don't know who Jen is the sexual violence coordinator here at Humber College and is responsible with the team of support of making tonight happen. And I noticed you didn't put yourself in the script, so I was like, I'm just gonna call you out and call you in and say you've done an amazing job and you deserve to take stock of the space that you've created for survivors on a daily basis, as that's not an easy job. So thank you, Jen. All right, friends, it's hype time. So where are your thunder sticks? Get them out. Get them out. So now we will be heading to march. So if you want to start walking out that way, again, remembering that we are folks with mobility devices and identified survivors are going to be marching forth. Have fun, everyone.